Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back to the program. My name is Habib Bobat and we are together discussing the noble life, the seerah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. May the choicest of blessings be upon our Master sallallahu alaihi wasallam and upon his household and those who follow in his footsteps ila yawmiddin. We've been discussing the persecution of the Quraysh, and we have discussed the engagement of the Quraysh with regards to Abu Talib, the uncle of the Prophet ﷺ, the advancements that they made, and the different engagements that they had with Abu Talib. And then we discussed how the Quraysh was so brutal towards the Prophet ﷺ himself. I shared with you the example when the Prophet of Allah was performing salah in the Kaaba. They took the entrails of the camel, the intestines and all the filth of the camel, and they placed this heavy burden on the back of the Prophet ﷺ to the point where he was unable to come out of sajda. We spoke about how they heckled him when he would speak. We spoke about the number of engagements that the Quraysh had, and we spoke at great length the smear campaign and the propaganda that the Quraysh had put together against the Prophet ﷺ, to the point that they had a meeting in Darun Nadwa. They gathered together that we are going to come on a common message. What are we going to say about Muhammad and his mission when people come from outside of Mecca? What are we going to say to them? We spoke about at great length how they went at every corner to stop people from entering into Islam and to warn them about Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And then we spoke about Dimad al-Azdi, the man who came to embrace Islam. Well, basically he came and he thought he was a medical practitioner and he thought that he could cure the Prophet. He thought that the Prophet of Allah was insane, na'udhu billah min dhalik. And we spoke about this incident at great length. So we spoke about Abu Talib, we spoke about the Prophet ﷺ, we spoke about the Quraysh and their efforts to smear the Prophet's name in public, and all of that in great detail. Today we are going to discuss the persecution that the early Sahaba faced in Makkatul Mukarramah. Now, before we go into the details, the context is important. When the mission was private, or when the mission was covert or in secrecy, the Muslims did not face that kind of torture as they faced when the mission became public and open. So, that's the one thing. The second thing is, when we talk about torture, the slaves were tortured very badly. The slaves were tortured very badly. And the free people who accepted Islam were also tortured, but their torture was different compared to the people that were slaves. The third thing to understand is that when we talk about the slaves had no tribe or no family to back them or to support them or provide security for them, as was the case with the free people. You had the Prophet of Allah, he was protected by Abu Talib and his family. Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was protected by his family, the Banu Taym. But the slaves, when we talk about the slaves, they were totally vulnerable. And they were at the mercy of the people they were working for. So with this broad context in mind, we're going to go into some of the stories of the early Sahaba who were tortured at the hands of the Quraysh. So one of the important stories to highlight is the story of Sayyidina Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala an. When the Muslims were still few in number, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq one day decided to give a sermon around the Kaaba, and the Prophet of Allah was sitting beside him. The Prophet of Allah advised against it, to say, we are still few in number, we don't have the power to retaliate or to defend ourselves. But Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu nonetheless felt that the time was right now for you to go public, to give your message openly. And so Sayyidina Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu spoke in the Kaaba. And he becomes the first person to deliver a sermon inviting people towards Islam. And when he started delivering his talk and his sermon, you think that the Quraysh was going to sit idle? No. The Quraysh immediately charged for Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, and they gave him such a severe beating that Abu Bakr as-Siddiq was bleeding, literally bleeding. And it reached a point where it was almost touch and go in terms of his life. Utbah ibn Rabi'ah took his shoe. He's one of the leaders of the Quraysh. He took his shoe and he beat Abu Bakr very severely on the head. As a result, he started bleeding. Luckily, as I mentioned to you, the free people had a tribe to protect them. Luckily, the Banu Taym, when they got to know about it, they immediately intervened and got Abu Bakr out of harm's way, and they brought him home. And they said, Wallahi, if Abu Bakr is to die in this condition, we will extract retribution from Utbah ibn Rabi'ah and we will take him out also. So they come home, they bring Abu Bakr, and he is in a very compromising situation. And it's a very delicate situation. And everybody around him are trying their best to nurse him, to provide support for him, and also to take care of his wounds. So they're all waiting for him to regain consciousness. He's knocked out at the moment. And after moments go by, after a long while, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala anhu gains conscious and he wakes up. And the first thing he asks is, how is Muhammad doing? Sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Imagine you are beaten so severely to the point where you might have even lost your life. And when you recover, the first thing that's on your mind is not how I am doing, but how is the Prophet of Allah doing? That was his concern. That was his worry. It is rare to see such love for one human being to love another human being. It is truly, truly amazing. So Abu Bakr regains consciousness, and the people around him are worried. They are asking him, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And he's only interested in one thing. How is Muhammad doing? How is Muhammad doing? So his mother was standing by after the people had left, and he asked his mother, what is the condition of Muhammad? And Ummul Khair, the mother of Abu Bakr, was Ummul Khair. She said, I've got no news about your companion. So Abu Bakr then said, why don't you go to Jamil, the sister and the daughter of Al-Khattab, go and find out from her. So the mother goes to Jamil, and she says that Abu Bakr is asking, how is the Prophet, how is Muhammad doing at the moment? So Jamil, maintaining utmost level of secrecy. You remember I spoke about secrecy, how they would keep things under wrap. She said, I don't know Abu Bakr and I don't know who's Muhammad. But if you want, I will follow you to your son Abu Bakr and see what's happening. So the mother agreed. Ummul Khair and Jamil comes into the house. And when Jamil lays her sight on Abu Bakr, she screams out by saying, by Allah, what a wicked group of people are these that have done this to you. May Allah extract revenge from them for you, O Abu Bakr. And she is worried for Abu Bakr because he's looking very fragile and weak and badly bruised and hurt. And Abu Bakr is only interested, tell me, how is my companion Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam doing? And Jamil and Ummul Khair, both of them tell Abu Bakr, why don't you rest? Why don't you eat something? Why don't you drink something? And then we can worry about this. He said, I will not eat, I will not drink I will not rest until I find out how Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is, and until I don't see him, I will not rest. So they said to him, okay, why don't you delay it for a little while? You regain some strength, and when you are ready, we will take you to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he asked her, where is he? And she said, he is in the house of Al-Arqam, the one that we spoke about previously. So Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu was too weak to walk on his own. By the support of the two ladies, he is walking to the house of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, to the house of Al-Arqam. And when they get to the house of Al-Arqam, the Prophet of Allah is elated. He's overjoyed to see Abu Bakr. He kisses him and hugs him and asks him how he is doing. We'll continue after this break and develop on the discussion. Don't go away. Welcome back to the program where we are discussing the life of the Prophet ﷺ. In the first segment, we spoke about the incident of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, that when he stood up to deliver the sermon, the Quraysh charged at him, and they beat him so severely that he was unconscious. He was bleeding, blood was oozing from his body, his head, and they took him in this very difficult condition of his back home. And when he regains conscious, the first thing he's worried about is, how is Muhammad? Now, coming back to the story, as I mentioned before the break, that through the support of the two ladies, mother on one side, Ummul Khair, and Jamil on the other side, by the support of the two ladies, he comes to the house of Al-Arqam. And when the Prophet of Allah sees him, the Prophet of Allah is too happy to see Abu Bakr. He kisses him and hugs him and asks him, how are you doing, O Abu Bakr? And Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala is conversing and talking with the Prophet of Allah, and he says to the Prophet of Allah, here is my mother Ummul Khair. Make dua for her and invite her to Islam. Perhaps she will accept Islam and Allah will give her hidayat. The Prophet of Allah did so, and she embraced Islam there and there. And Ummul Khair becomes a Sahabiya, and she is now radiyallahu ta'ala anha. So this is the one incident. A man like Abu Bakr was vulnerable at times, and had it not been for his tribe and his clan, he probably would have died on that day. Now, there's a few points to highlight here in the story of Abu Bakr as-Siddiq. The first one is the amazing courage this man had, that he was so confident in his message that he decided to go open and public about the message of Islam. That requires amazing courage and a lot of daringness. And Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala showed this through his actions, number one. Number two, the Quraysh were not taking this lightly. They were not going to sit idle and let anybody come in the midst of their gathering, give a lecture or a talk. And so they charged upon him and they beat him very brutally. The third thing we learn from here is the love that Abu Bakr had for the Prophet of Allah was unmatched indeed. And it is no surprise that the Prophet of Allah and Abu Bakr were like this right till the end, in life, in death, and in after death also. He is buried, resting next to the Prophet of Allah. In life also he was next to the Prophet of Allah, the only man to have the honor of making hijrah with the Prophet ﷺ and no one else. The same man was very close, a bosom friend and a confidant of the Prophet ﷺ. The narration is in Bukhari, لَوْ كُنْتُ مُتَّخِذًا خَلِيلًا غَيْرَ رَبِّي لَاتَّخَذْتُ أَبَا بَكْرٍ خَلِيلًا. That if I were allowed to make anyone as a Khalil, Khalil is the highest level of friendship and the most intimate of friendship. if it was permissible for me to take anyone as a Khalil other than Allah, I would have taken Abu Bakr as my Khalil. And the Quran praises Abu Bakr because of his unwavering support for the Prophet ﷺ. His unflinching support for the Prophet of Allah was amazing. And we see his love and his care for the Prophet of Allah in this incident, that instead of being worried about his own well-being, he's more worried about the Prophet of Allah. And it is no surprise because they were so close to each other. Before Islam, in Islam, and even after death. The fourth point we learn from here is the level of diplomacy, the level of secrecy in the operations. When Khair, the mother of Abu Bakr, came to Jamil, the daughter of Al-Khattab, Jamil said, I don't know Abu Bakr and I don't know who's Muhammad. This is a level of secrecy that they maintain. In fact, the hadith mentions, and the story goes on, the story is that when Jamil came to visit Abu Bakr asked Jamil, how is the Prophet of Allah? And she said, your mother is standing here. Your mother is standing here. Meaning, I don't know if it's safe to talk about the Prophet of Allah in the presence of your mother, because we don't know where her inclinations are. So Abu Bakr assured her to say, she is my mother, you can trust her, you can be confident in her, there will be no leaks here. Then only she spoke. So the level of secrecy in the mission of the Prophet ﷺ was amazing. Everybody had a way of operating, a code by which they were trained. So we have to understand the level of diplomacy on their part also. And the next point that we learn from here, that Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala is so sharp and alert. Although he's coming from such a traumatic experience, when he comes to visit the Prophet of Allah, his worry is, how can I get my mother also into the fold of Islam? Subhanallah, isn't this amazing? So when he is talking to the Prophet of Allah, he says to the Prophet of Allah, this is my mother Khair, make dua for her and invite her to the deen of Islam. Perhaps Allah will grant her guidance. And that is what happened. So this illustrates his alertedness, his presence of mind, and his far-sightedness. How far this man was thinking, even though he's suffering and he comes in the backdrop of such a traumatic incident. So we have to understand the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum paid a hefty price for them to practice Islam, for them to express their religion and their identity, and for them to abide by the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. As you will see when we go into more details of more Sahaba, the kind of sufferings that they endured. So one is Abu Bakr. Another famous companion of the Prophet of Allah, which you and I are well acquainted with, is Bilal ibn Rabah. Bilal ibn Rabah was an Abyssinian slave, an outsider, not from Mecca, and he is working as a slave for Umayyah bin Khalaf. Now Umayyah was a wicked man, And as I mentioned to you, that how the torture and the persecution would take place is that every tribe was responsible for the people under them. So if people from the Banu Makhzum accepted Islam, then the Banu Makhzum had to deal with them and treat them harshly. If people from the Banu Umayyad, if they accepted Islam, then the Banu Umayyad was responsible for the torture and the persecution of the people in their tribe. So every tribe was dealing with its own members that accepting the religion. And the slaves had no protection. Bilal ibn Rabah did not have any protection. He was vulnerable because he was a slave. Ammar ibn Yasir and his family, Khabbab ibn al-Arat, and all other people. These were vulnerable people in Mecca. Their hands, they were lashed, and in many ways they were tortured. This is what they had faced just for accepting the deen and the religion of the Prophet ﷺ. So I'm creating the context before we go into the specifics. This was the situation of the labor class or the slaves in Mecca, and the masters acted with total impunity. Total impunity. We look at the incident of Khabbab ibn al-Arat. You look at the incident of Bilal ibn Rabah. You look at the incident of Sumayya. You look at the incident of Ammar. You look at the incident of the father of Ammar. You look at the incident of many other Sahaba who were tortured at the hands of their masters. And at this point, what is important to highlight is accepting Islam was not a free card, was not a card to escape your bondage. Because it's not like when you accepted Islam, you came into riches. To the contrary, Islam is still coming up. Things are still very difficult. There isn't a state. There isn't a treasury. So people who accepted Islam did not accept Islam for the sake of the world. They accepted Islam solely to earn eternal salvation. This point is important to highlight. So the slaves who came into Islam was not that if they accepted Islam, they were free from the torture. Rather, it just made life more difficult and unbearable for them. In our next program, we're going to look at the lives of some of the early Sahaba that were tortured at the hands of the Quraysh.